He was one of the most iconic and successful pirates in the golden age of piracy, donning a bright red jacket, a hat with a crimson feather in it, golden chains and jewels, elaborate sword at his waist, and pistols strapped across his chest. He would command his powerful vessel, the Royal Fortune, to capture over 470 ships. From the seas surrounding Newfoundland, Canada, down to the Caribbean and across the Atlantic to the coasts of Africa, this is the legendary story and tragic death of Bartholomew "Black Bart" Roberts. John Roberts was born in 1682 to Roger Roberts and his wife in the town of Little Newcastle, Wales, where he would grow up speaking Welsh, and that would come to serve him quite well in the near future. When John was 13 years old, he joined the Merchant Navy, and he found there nothing but a life of hardship and strife. Merchants were not paid very well, and he was a fledgling sailor, so life was hard for him there. He was aboard a slave ship called the Princess, just off the coast of Africa, when the Princess was captured by notorious Welsh pirate Howell Davis. So the entire crew of the Princess was captured and press-ganged into service aboard Howell Davis's ship, the Royal James. So John Roberts was initially reluctant to join the pirates, but Howell Davis soon noticed his skill as a navigator, and because he could communicate with him in Welsh, they actually became very close. And it wasn't long before John realized that piracy was a much better life than working for the Navy. He's in fact quoted as saying, "In an honest service there is thin commons, low wages, and hard labor. In this, plenty and satiety, pleasure and ease, liberty and power. And who would not balance creditor on this side, when all the hazard that is run for it, at worst, only a sour look or two at choking? No, a merry life and a short one shall be my motto." So clearly John thought it was better to live a short life of piracy than a longer life enslaved to the Navy. So John changed his name to Bartholomew and became a pirate officially. So 6 weeks after joining Howell Davis's crew, Davis sailed the Royal John into the port of Principe in Portugal under a British flag, and they were disguised as British sailors. He had a plan. He was going to invite the governor of Portugal aboard his ship for lunch. And then once the governor was on there, he would hold him hostage until a ransom was paid. However, the Portuguese soon discovered that their new guests were in fact pirates. So they did a little Uno reverse on them. When Howell Davis came on shore to pick up the governor invited him back to his mansion for a cup of fancy wine. And of course, pirates love to drink, so they agreed. On the way to the governor's mansion, the pirates were ambushed and Howell Davis was shot in his stomach and died, but not before firing off his pistols one last time with his dying breath. So the remaining pirates got back on the boat and they took off. They regrouped, but they were now leaderless, so they had to elect a new captain. They elected Bartholomew Roberts. Apparently Bartholomew said something along the lines of, "Since I've already dipped my hands in muddy waters and must be a pirate, better to be a commander than a common man." Which makes sense. If you're gonna be a pirate, may as well be the captain, right? So his first act as captain was to turn the boat right back around, go back to Principe, and then in the cover of night, they started bombarding the town. They went ashore and killed every man in town and stole as much treasure and loot as they could carry back to the ship. After fleeing the port of Principe, they actually captured 2 more vessels and then made their way to Anambo on the coast of Africa to resupply and repair their ship before making their way to Brazil. So when he got to Brazil, Bartholomew came across 40 or so Portuguese ships making their way to Lisbon, and he was able to capture the largest ship in the fleet, the Sagrada Familia. And on board that ship, he found 40,000 Portuguese gold coins and then a bunch of gold and golden jewels and treasures heading for the King of Portugal. So with their loot, they hightailed it out of there. and they headed for a place called Devil's Island near Guyana, and there they just stayed for a few weeks and spent a bunch of their well-earned money. So shortly after they left Devil's Island, they came across a sloop, and Bartholomew Roberts was able to capture that, and he made it part of his new little fleet. And after capturing the sloop, they spied a brigantine. So Roberts took 40 of his best men onto the sloop, and they went after the brigantine, and they left the Royal John under the command of a guy named Walter Kennedy, which would turn out to be a mistake. So while they were pursuing the brigantine, the sloop became windbound. Basically, the wind wasn't good enough for them to chase after it or really get anywhere. Either the wind wasn't strong or it was blowing in the wrong direction. So they returned to Devil's Island, and they found out that Kennedy had stolen the Royal John and all the remaining money and bailed. And it was after this betrayal that Bartholomew Roberts wrote the most famous version of the Pirate Code, which I will talk about later in the video. Shortly after this, Roberts found himself under attack by ships from Barbados and Martinique, which he was not happy about, so he swore revenge on the people of Martinique, and then he sailed north to the greatest country that ever existed. So, Roberts sailed north to Newfoundland, where he would stage raids on ports in Nova Scotia and around the islands of Cape Breton, and he was able to capture a lot of ships in this time. He was very successful. He eventually set up a shipyard in the Mira River where he could careen, or stop and repair, his ships. He would attack the harbor of Fairyland, and he captured over a dozen ships there, and then he went to the harbor of Trepassey. He sailed into the harbor with this black flag flying, and the terrified merchants and fishermen all just abandoned their ships. Roberts would eventually comment on how he hated the cowardice of these captains. But he was able to capture 22 merchant ships and 150 fishing vessels, which was huge. So they took as much loot as they could from all the ships, captured a few of them to add to the fleet, and then when they left, they set every other ship on fire, which was devastating to the fishing trade in that region. So in July of 1720, Roberts and his crew were able to capture 10 French vessels. They took the largest of that little fleet and remodeled it, adding 26 guns. He made this ship his flagship and called it the Good Fortune, and eventually the Royal Fortune after it got repaired again. Roberts then sailed back to the Caribbean, where he reportedly caught another 15 English and French vessels in 3 days. That's wild. 5 ships a day. And at one point, Bartholomew Roberts captured a huge 52-gun French vessel, and on board, he found the governor of Martinique. Like I said before, he kind of swore revenge against the people of Martinique. Now, Bartholomew Roberts was uncharacteristically kind to his captives for a pirate, but not to this governor of Martinique because of said revenge. He hung the governor from the yardarm of his own ship. So after the governor was dead, he captured the 52-gun vessel, and that became the next iteration of the Royal Fortune. There's actually a couple versions of the Royal Fortune. Anytime he captures a new big ship, he just renames it to the Royal Fortune, and that becomes the new Royal Fortune. And so, after essentially devastating the trade in the New World, Roberts set sail at last back to Africa. So, upon his arrival in Africa, Roberts captured 2 more French vessels and took those into his fleet, and he renamed them to the Ranger and the Little Ranger, because I guess they were big and small. In Liberia, they captured 2 more ships full of soldiers, and the soldiers actually wanted to join the pirate crew. However, they weren't paid quite as much as the other sailors because they weren't career sailors. They didn't really know how to sail. They were like foot soldiers. But they still willingly joined, and Bartholomew Roberts took the largest of the ship, the Onslow, and guess what? Renamed it to the new Royal Fortune. I think this was like the 4th iteration of the Royal Fortune. Then in 1722, Roberts sailed into the port of Whydah with one of his many black flags waving and was able to capture 11 ships with no resistance. That's how terrifying pirates were to people. They were willing to give up their ships without a fight when they see this flag. Now, most of the ships were returned to their owners. However, Roberts demanded a ransom of 8 pounds of gold dust for each ship. And I don't mean like British pounds sterling, I mean like 8 pounds of gold for each ship. And any captain who refused was trapped on his boat and they set it on fire. Eventually, in February of 1722, the English captain Challoner Ogle, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, was sailing his ship the Swallow, and he came upon Roberts and the Royal Fortune. Bartholomew Roberts and his crew had just captured a ship called the Neptune, and they were busy partying and carousing. Roberts himself didn't like drinking very much, but he wasn't going to stop his crew from having fun after they just had a success. So the crew were a little bit 3 shoots to the wind, as you might say, and were not expecting this raid from an English war vessel. So when they realized they were under attack, Roberts donned his typical war gear, I guess you would call it. He always wore a bright, fancy red coat, a crimson hat with a bright red feather in it. He wore lots of gold chains and golden jewels. He had a beautiful sword that he kept at his side, and he had 2 pistols bandoliered across his chest. He was like a quintessential pirate. So the pirates' plan was to speed past the Swallow and just tank a broadside. Just like take a few hits and then book it out of there. But they weren't able to get past him properly, and Olge's crew was able to hit them with a second broadside. And this proved fatal for Bartholomew Roberts. He was hit in the throat with grape shot, so like a bunch of little, it's like a shotgun blast from a cannon that's literally designed to take out the rigging and take out the crew. And Roberts died nearly instantly. So Bartholomew's crew knew that he wanted to be buried at sea. So they weighed him down by dressing him up in all of his finest gold and jewels and his best dress coat.
Quick, me coat! Me best dress coat!
And they wrapped him in a sailcloth and they threw him over the side. And his body has never been found. I'm sure whoever finds it will be a rich man. However, the battle turned for the worse for the pirates, and all 272 of Roberts' crew were captured, including 65 freed slaves, who Captain Olge just sold back into slavery, because he was kind of a dick. And of course, he stole all the gold dust that was aboard Roberts' ships, and for his victory, he was given a knighthood and admiralty in the British Navy. Many sources say that this battle was kind of a turning of the tide in the war against piracy, and is often cited as the beginning of the end of the golden age of piracy. So, as I mentioned in my first pirate video, every ship had a pirate code. It was like a list of rules that the crew and the officers would have to follow, ensuring like diplomacy and fair distribution of the treasure and stuff like that. But the most famous one was written by Bartholomew Roberts. But there's no real evidence that he ever interacted with Henry Morgan as implied by the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
The code has set both by Morgan and Bartholomew.
And because in my previous video I promised to talk more about it in this video, I will go through all 11 articles of Bartholomew Roberts' pirate code, and I'll just briefly summarize because it's like 16th century or 17th century English. It can get kind of wordy. So I'm just going to read through them briefly for you guys now. Article number 1. All men can vote on affairs of movement. So basically where they would go and what ships they would capture. And they were entitled to equal shares in the food and drink unless there was scarcity and the food needed to be like strictly rationed. Article number 2. Every man would take turns dividing non-cash prizes like clothing, like plates and cutlery and stuff like that. But if anything was stolen from the company, like from the main treasure hoard, marooning was the punishment. If you stole from an individual, they would cut your nostrils or your ears, like give little notches in them, and then they would put you somewhere on shore where hardship would inevitably befall you. Like if they put you down in a port and they saw all your nose and ears cut up, they knew you were a thief. Not necessarily marooning, but still not very good. Number 3, no gambling for money. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. It can create hostility pretty quick if like someone's winning all of your money, right? So, number 4, lights out at 8 p.m. If you want to stay up and keep drinking, you do so on the open deck. I mean, candles on a ship are, we don't really think about this. Candles are a limited resource. So if you're staying up all night burning all the candles, eventually you're going to run out and then you're stuck in the dark. So yeah, no wasting the candles. And of course, open flames on a wooden ship can kind of be a recipe for disaster if you're drinking. Number 5, swords and pistols are to be kept clean and ready for service at all times. Again, pretty self-explanatory. You don't want to get caught unawares and then your pistol doesn't work. Number 6, no girls allowed. Anyone who tried to sneak his girlfriend on board would be put to death. So, seems kind of extreme, but yeah, I guess that would create a weird environment on the ship. So yeah, no girls. Number 7, to desert the ship or post during battle was punishable by death or marooning. So yeah, if you're a coward, you're getting marooned. Sorry, man. Number 8, no fighting on board. All quarrels are to be settled on land with sword or pistol. So like a good old-fashioned duel. You don't want your crew like throwing hands whenever they have a disagreement. And hopefully, by the time it takes to get to shore for said duel, usually cooler heads will prevail and the conflict will be forgotten or worked out entirely. Number 9, you don't get to quit until you've earned at least 1,000 pounds. And I think at this point we are talking about like British pounds sterling, like $1,000. But if you lose a limb, you will be paid 800 pounds and slightly less for other body parts. So yeah, if you lost like an eye or like a hand or something, you would get paid out for that. If you want to retire early and you already saved up 200 pounds, just get your leg chopped off. There you go. Then you can retire. Number 10, the captain and quartermaster get 2 shares of the treasure. The bosun, gunner, and master get 1.5, and other officers get 1 1/4. So, pays to be an officer. And then everyone else would get an equal share. And number 11, musicians get to rest on Sundays, but have to play every other day of the week. If you're a musician and you're aboard a pirate vessel, you're gonna get real good at whatever instrument you play because you are playing every night for the crew's entertainment. And yeah, that was basically it. Like, other ships might have similar or like slightly different rules, but there was no big thick book. There was no parlay.
It's the one. Parlay. Parlay.
It was just rules to keep the ship in order.
The code is more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
Now, Roberts was also known to have a whole bunch of black flags that he used over the course of his career. One was described as a skull with a cutlass, or a skull with an arm holding a cutlass. These may or may not have been like the same flag, described kind of differently, or 2 separate flags. Not really sure, because there's not a lot of evidence from that time. One was described as just a black flag with a white skeleton in it. And then there is some evidence that he used a flag of a skeleton and a dude holding an hourglass between them, which would symbolize things like, oh, your time has come, death is coming for you, that sort of thing. And then a whole bunch of other flags that are uncorroborated but are rumored to have been used by him. He couldn't really make up his mind on a design. But whether or not he used any of these flags, they're all still pretty cool. Now, Bartholomew Roberts didn't really get his nickname Black Bart until after his death, and allegedly that was inspired by his dark black hair and also his fearsome reputation. Even though among pirates he was actually one of the more genteel. He is described as very gentlemanly. He would like to sit on deck and drink tea while the other pirates were drinking rum and carousing. Some say he was a teetotaler, which is like someone who doesn't drink at all, but there's not really evidence to support that. He probably did drink, just not as much as like a working sailor would. And he was the picturesque pirate. He loved finer things, lavish clothes, big fancy hats and stuff like that. And he was been mentioned and referenced in a lot of works of media, like Robert Louis Stevens's Treasure Island, obviously in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. He was a villain in the video game Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I'm pretty sure that his iconic look was the inspiration for characters such as Captain Hook from J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan novel or play. He also directly inspired the Dread Pirate Roberts from the beloved classic movie Princess Bride. So Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts was inarguably one of the most iconic, and as far as ships captured, one of the most successful pirates of the Golden Age. Thanks for watching, guys. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more historical pirate lore. I hope you're all drinking lots of water, doing lots of push-ups, and stay safe. Till next time.